Yeah, start.
Development of biology over the years. So सिंपली एक तरह की बायोलॉजिकल स्टडी है कि हमारे कल्चर जैसे हम जितने भी ह्यूमंस हैं तो हमारे अलग अलग कल्चर्स हैं तो हम इसको कैसे देखते हैं बायोलॉजी को. इंट्रोडक्शन में हम इस एंशिएंट एंड मेडिवल नॉलेज, रेनेसांस एंड अर्ली मॉडर्न डेवलपमेंट्स एंड एमर्जेंस ऑफ बायोलॉजिकल डिसिप्लिन्स, एंड लास्ट में हम अदर डेवलपमेंट्स के बारे में भी बात करेंगे. Ancient developments. The earliest human must have had and passed on the knowledge about the plants and animals to increase the chance of survival. So basically, in the beginning, humans were not considering biology as a separate or important stream. So it was just for their survival, for like medicinal purposes or other like food and all that stuff. This may have included knowledge of human and animal anatomy and aspects of animal behavior, such as migration patterns of various animals like wildebeest in Africa. However, the first major turning point in the biological knowledge came with the Neolithic revolution about 10,000 years ago, when humans first domesticated plants such as wheat and rice for the farming, and then on the livestock animals such as cows and buffaloes and dogs to accompany the resulting sedentary societies. So some of these are the basic cultures that were dominating at that time in these researches were the Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Indian subcontinent, and China. So Mesopotamia covers today's Iraq and Syria, among others, produced renowned surgeons and students of the natural sciences, such as Shushruth, you must have heard about the father of plastic surgery, and Zhang Zhaozhang, reflecting independent, sophisticated systems of the natural philosophy. However, the roots of modern biology, such as today we are studying like biomedical and bioengineering and all that stuff, are usually traced back to the secular tradition of the ancient Greek philosophy. So here we are discussing the Mesopotamian views. So the land of Mesopotamia is now today known as Iraq and Syria, that covers the area of Euphrates and Tigris rivers. The ancient Mesopotamians had no distinction between the rational science and magic. They considered both as the same. For example, their basic science knowledge was limited to the religious stuffs. Like they were influenced by religion to do the research. When a person became ill, doctor prescribed both magical formulas to be decided and medicinal treatments. I hope you understand this all the medicinal formulas like many people still believe in the magical stuff can cure the various kind of diseases. The earliest medical prescriptions appear in the Sumerian text during the third dynasty of Ur. Most extensive Babylonian medical text, however, is the Diagnostic Handbook. This was one of the first major breakthroughs in the field of biology. So it is related with the medicinal purposes. As you know, as I stated before, that ancients were usually dealing with biology for the healthcare and all that purpose. Written in Umanu, or the chief scholar Esgagil Kin Apli of Borosippa, during the reign of Babylonian king Adad al-Falfa. In the East Semitic cultures, that is today's Israel and the Arab nations, the main medicinal authority was exorcist healer known as Ispiru. The profession was passed down from father to son, such as that it was hereditary and was held at high regard, or you can say it was considered as a good social status. Of less frequent recourse was the Asu, a herbal dealer who treated physical symptoms using remedies composed of herbs and other stuff. These physicians could be either male or female and or dress wounds. The ancient Mesopotamians also practiced prophylaxis and measures to prevent spread of disease, such as you can say in the case of leprosy, they prefer social distancing, like today we are doing in the case of COVID-19. So here is an image of a medical receipt concerning poisoning, terracotta tablet from the Nippur, Iraq, 18th century BC. That is a receipt, you can say, or medical prescription dealing with the cause of poisoning and its cure. Now Chinese views.
Just a second.
In the ancient, yes.
Just a second, yeah. If anyone has any questions or want to give any views on this topic, then they can unmute and go ahead. Okay, you can continue, Harmilan.
I hope you guys are feeling it comfortable and not a boring stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
So here comes the Chinese thinking and their views upon the biology. In ancient China, biological topics can be found dispersed across several different disciplines, including the works of herbologists, physicians, alchemists, and philosophers. The Taoist tradition of Chinese alchemy, for example, can be considered as the part of the life sciences due to their emphasis on health, with the ultimate goal for being the elixir of life. This was the elixir of life that led to the development of the gunpowder. This is gunpowder. Now you can see this. The Chinese views are much more science basic. Like it is different from the religious views of the Mesopotamians, and it deals with herbs and physicians. Like though there is a little bit of alchemy and philosophy, but it has a simple basic on the research base. The system of classical Chinese medicine usually revolved around the theory of yin and yang and the five phase. You usually have seen the yin and yang in the, for example, Chinese movies and kung fu, that black and white circle that represent life and death and good and evil. Taoist philosophers such as Zhuangzi in the 4th century BC also expressed the ideas related to the evolution. And these are the first ideas related to the evolution before
Harmilan,
the,
excuse
yes.
me, Harmilan. Are you going to talk about mostly medicine or also other aspects of biology?
Actually, we are still dealing with the ancient views, so they were much more regarding to the medicinal purposes rather than the evolution and all that.
Okay, okay.
Evolution part.
As we go on to the medieval and modern, the field will enlarge. Okay. तो मैंने आपसे कहा था कि जो पहले एंशियंट व्यूज हैं तो वो अभी थोड़ा सा मेडिसिनल पर्पसेस पे ही रहेंगे. तो हम जैसे मेडिवल एरिया और मॉडर्न एरा में आएंगे तो अलग अलग ब्रांचेस बनने लग जाएंगी, जैसे एवोल्यूशन और बाकी सब. Description of rare animals you can see as in the picture. Indian views. The ancient Indian Ayurvedic tradition independently developed the concept of three humors that was known as Vat, Pitta, and Kapha, resembling that of the four humors of the ancient Greek medicine. The Ayurvedic system included four complications such as body being composed of five elements and seven basic tissues. Ayurvedic writers also classified living things into four categories based on the methods of birth, from the womb, egg, heat, and moisture and seed, and explained the concept of fetus in detail. They also made considerable advances in the field of surgery without the use of human dissection or animal vivisection. So the Indian views differs very much from the Mesopotamian and the Chinese view, as they are carrying research on other processes such as birth and the structure of the fetus and animal vivisection and other. So they are just not limited to the human medicine and all that stuff. One of the earliest Ayurvedic treatises, such as Shushrut Samhita, attributed to the Shushrut in the 6th century BC, it is also an early materia medica, describing 700 medicinal plants, 64 preparations from mineral sources, and 57 preparations based upon the animal sources. तो आप देख सकते हैं कि इंडियंस काफी उस टाइम में भी काफी एडवांस थे उस हिसाब से, जैसे कि बाकी सब अभी तक मेडिसिनल तक ही सीमित थे और ये रिसर्च कैरी आउट कर रहे थे विविसेक्शन, फीटस डेवलपमेंट में. Greek and Roman views. So this is the main foundation of the biology according to modern civilization. The philosopher Aristotle, as you know, he was a polymath, was the most influential scholar of the living world from the classic antiquity. Though his early works in the natural philosophy was speculative, Aristotle's later biological writings were more empirical, focusing on biological causation and the diversity of life. So he is discussing about the diversity instead of just being discussing about the medicinal purposes. He is finding the how did this life came into being. As you, many of us have already studied that Greeks were the first to dissect the animals and the embryos for their study. He made countless observations of nature, especially the habits and attributes of plants and animals in the world around him, which he devoted considerably attention to categorizing. In all, Aristotle classified 540 animal species and dissected at least 50 of them. He believed that intellectual versus formal causes guided all natural processes. And like जैसे कि आप कह सकते हैं कि पिछले वाले काफी हद से अपने रिलीजन से भी इन्फ्लुएंस थे और वो उसी के अंदर रह के उस पर रिसर्च कर रहे थे पर इन्होंने ग्रीक्स एंड रोमन्स ने like Romans carried on the further research of the Greeks. They were limited on they were based on a secular viewpoint, keeping religion away from the sciences and the Islamic views. So Islamic views are also very much important, though they are almost neglected. Islamic medicine preserved the systematic development of the medicinal knowledge of classic antiquity, including the major tradition of Hippocrates, Galen, and Discrodius. During the post-classical era, Islamic medicine was the most advanced in the world, integrating the different concepts of ancient Roman, Mesopotamian, Persian, as well as the Ayurvedic traditions. Since the fall of the Roman Empire was a cultural disaster for many of the researchers, it was the Islamic era that contributed to the development of the biology. So it was also the Islamic scholars in the Baghdad, so that which they carried out the first described the internal structure of an eye, a human eye. So that was a big task like for according to their era. A biomedical work by Ibn al-Nafis, an early attender of experimental dissection who discovered the pulmonary and coronary circulation. So see, it was the Arabs who were dealing with the most of the human anatomy. And this book was written in Persian in the Islamic era of the Abbasid Caliphate. Renaissance. So now we are in the medieval era, like the Europe in the era of the, you must have heard of the Galileo and all the other scientists were during this era, right? Renaissance and early modern developments in the field of biology. The European Renaissance brought expanded interest in both empirical natural history and physiology. In 1543, Andreas Vesalius inaugurated the first modern era of Western medicine with his seminal human anatomy treatise De Humani Corporis Fabrica, which was based upon the dissection of corpses. And they say he used to go to the cemeteries and dig the corpses out to carry out the dissection, as it was banned by the church during that era. Vesalius was the first in the series of anatomists who replaced scholasticism with empiricism in the physiology and medicine, relying on the first-hand experience rather than the authority and abstract reasoning. Artists such as Albert Dürer and Leonardo da Vinci, as you know, many have heard of Leonardo da Vinci was a polymath. He also carried out research in the fields of biology and engineering also. Like the first model of an airplane and a tank was also given by Leonardo. Often working with naturalists, were also interested in the bodies of animals and humans, studying physiology in detail and contributing to the growth of anatomical knowledge. Leonardo also made various anatomical sketches of the human body and also of fetus and other things. The tradition of alchemy and natural magic was also synonymous with the chemistry field during the medieval era. Like, though alchemy lost its importance in the late 17th century, it still holds true for many people in that time, especially in the work of Paracelsus also laid claim to the knowledge of the living world. Alchemists subjected organic matter to the chemical analysis and experimented liberally with both biological and mineral pharmacology. So as you see, people are also making now developments in the chemical understanding of the biological nature, like what kind of compositions are there in a living organism. And you guys must have noticed this, that religion has been almost separated by the time of early modern era. That is around the 18th century. Any questions, anybody? Till here. Okay. In the early 17th century, the micro world of biology was just beginning to open up. That is today's modern microbiology, like dealing with the unicellular organism and microscopic organisms. A few lens makers and natural philosophers had been creating crude microscopes since the late 16th century. And Robert Hooke published the seminal Micrographia based upon his observations with his own compound microscope in 1665. And he was also the first person to name the coin the term cell, which means a little room in Latin. But it was not until the Antoinette van Leeuwenhoek's dramatic improvements in lens making beginning in the 1670s ultimately proved to be producing up to 200-fold magnification with a single lens. That scholar discovers various kinds of cells like spermatozoa, bacteria, infusoria, and many protists, and the sheer strangeness and diversity of the microscopic life. Similar investigations by Jan Swaverdam led to the interest in entomology and built basic techniques for the microscopic dissections and staining. And here is a photograph from the Robert Hooke's Micrographia, and these are the cork cells which he drew by himself. Now we enter the modern era that constitutes in the 19th century, the emergence of biological disciplines as they are biological disciplines. Up through the 19th century, the scope of biology was largely divided between medicine, which investigated questions of form and function, that is physiology, and natural history, which was concerned with the diversity of life and the interaction among the different forms of life and between life and non-life. By 1900s, much of these domains were overlapped, while natural history and its counterpart natural philosophy had largely given way to the more specialized scientific disciplines, that is cytology, bacteriology, morphology, embryology, geography, and geology. Evolution. The most significant, as I stated before, it was the Chinese philosophers in the ancient era that hinted there is an evolutionary process that leads to the formation of new species. But it was very much discarded during that time. And there was a resurgence in the study of evolution in the 18th century. The most significant evolutionary theory before the advent of Darwin was of Jean Baptiste Lamarck, based upon the inheritance acquired characteristics, and described a chain of development stretching from the lowliest microbe to the human. As you guys must have heard about that, how did giraffe is having its long neck? Like it adapted to the various kind of, like there are some long trees in some areas, so giraffe adapted to the length of the tree and made adaptations according to it, so his neck grew long according to the Lamarckism. However, this theory was discarded when the British naturalist Charles Darwin, combining the biogeographical approach of the Alexander von Humboldt and the uniformitarian geology of Lyle Thomas Malthus' writing on the population growth and his own morphological expertise, created a more successful evolutionary theory based upon the natural selection. Similar evidences led to the Alfred Russel Wallace to independently reach the same conclusion. Alfred used to be working in the Malayan archipelago, that is present is Indonesia and Malaysia, whereas Darwin's first observations were made at the islands of Galapagos, off the coast of South America. The 1859 publication of Darwin's theory on the origin of species by means of natural selection or the preservation of favored races in the struggle for life is often considered the central event in the history of the modern biology. So it was a breakthrough through, like, as many of our religions, as you can see, still people are believing in the, like, formation is done on spontaneous basis. Like in Christianity and Islam, they believe that the earth was formed in 7 days and Adam and Eve are the ancestors of all the humans. However, the Darwin said that ancestors were not humans from the starting. They were another species that gradually evolved into the present day Homo sapiens. Darwin established credibility as a naturalist. The sober tone of the work and most of the sheer strength and the volume of evidence presented allowed the origin to succeed where the previous evolutionary work, such as anonymous vestige of the creation, had failed, like the religious and all the views. Most of the scientists were convinced of the evolution and common descent by the end of the 19th century. However, natural selection would not be accepted as the primary mechanism of the evolution until well into the 20th century. So, this is the Charles Darwin's first sketch of an evolutionary tree from his first notebook on the transmutation of species. जब वो HMS स्पीगल पे था, जो शिप थी उसकी जिसपे उसने अपने पूरा एडवेंचर किया था, मतलब आप कह सकते हो ट्रैवल किया था 1837 में, ये उसके पर्सनल नोट्स हैं. एवोल्यूशन का फर्स्ट ट्री है जो आज तक देखा है किसी ने, लिटरली. इसमें थोड़ी बहुत इंग्लिश तो पढ़ी जा सकती है. ये लिखा हुआ आई थिंक डीबी इसने बनाया हुआ है. जर्म थ्योरी. आपने माइक म्यूट कर लो. Germ theory. Advances in the microscopy also had a profound impact on the biological thinking. In the early 19th century, a number of biologists point to the central importance of the cell. तो आप जैसे समझ सकते हैं कि ये पहले लोग जैसे कहते थे कि अगर फॉर एग्जांपल चिकन पॉक्स या स्मॉल पॉक्स फैला हुआ है तो हमारे इंडिया में तो आ गई है बंदे में. सिंपली वो मतलब जर्म थ्योरी को डिस्कार्ड कर रहे थे. मतलब तब लोगों को पता नहीं था कि माइक्रोस्कोपिक ऑर्गेनिज्म सच एज बैक्टीरिया एंड वायरसेस आर कॉजिंग द डिजीज. इंस्टेड दे blamed the omens and other things. और आपको एक बात बताता हूँ कि इस हद तक लोग बिलीव करते थे कि जब ब्लैक डेथ फैली थी यूरोप में 14th सेंचुरी में, तब लिटरली पूरे चर्च ने ऐसे ही बोल दिया था कि ज्यूज के कारण हो रहा है ये सब कुछ. तो लिटरली वहां पे दंगे फसाद हो गए और इतने ज्यूज को मार दिया ब्लैक डेथ के नाम पे कि ये फैला रहे हैं, एनिमीज ऑफ द क्राइस्ट एंड एनिमीज ऑफ द क्रिश्चियन किंगडम्स. By the mid 1850s, the miasma theory of the disease was largely superseded by the germ theory, creating an extensive interest in the microorganisms and the interaction with other forms of life. By 1880s, bacteriology was becoming a coherent discipline, especially through the work of Robert Koch, who introduced methods for growing pure cultures on agar gels containing specific nutrients in the petri dish. तो ये हमारे बायोटेक रिलेटेड काम आ गया है, अगर जेल्स पेट्री डिश वगैरह. तो यहाँ से स्टार्ट होती है और आज की मॉडर्न बायोलॉजी और उसकी अलग अलग फील्ड्स. The long-held idea of that living organism could easily originate from the non-living matter, spontaneous generation, was attacked in a series of experiments carried out by Louis Pasteur. While debates over vitalism and mechanism, a perennial issue since the times of Aristotle and the great atomist, continues with space. वो तब जो एंशिएंट ग्रीक के टाइम से चला आ रहा था वो कि वाइटलिज्म और मैकेनिज्म में वो अभी तक चल रहा था 19th सेंचुरी के एंड तक. And here is Louis Pasteur, modern father of microbiology. Genetics. In 1900 marked the so-called rediscovery of the Mendel's work by the Hugo de Vries, Carl Correns, and Ernst Schimak. Independently arrived at the Mendel's law. As you know, Mendel published his laws in a local journal in German, and it didn't gather much attention during that era due to the popularity of the natural selection theory of Darwin. So it was forgotten, but in 1900 it was rediscovered by these three scientists: Hugo de Vries of Netherlands, Carl Correns of Germany, and Ernst Schimak of Austria and Hungary. Soon after, the cytologist, cell biologist, proposed that chromosomes were the hereditary material, like the passing of the genes, that the material, as Mendel stated as the factors, was the chromosomes. Between 1900 and 1915, Thomas Hunt Morgan, the American scientist, and the Drosophilites in his fly labs forged these two ideas, both controversial, into the Mendelian chromosome theory of the heredity. Like the ideas of chromosomes were mixed with the Mendelian laws. And here the Drosophilites refers to the people who were carrying the experiments on the Drosophila melanogaster, the model organism for the chromosomal studies and genetic studies in that time. They quantified the phenomenon of genetic linkage and postulated that genes reside on chromosomes, like beads on strings. They hypothesized crossing over to explain the linkage and constructed genetic maps of the fruit fly, Drosophila melanogaster. In 1920s and 1930s, following the acceptance of Mendelian chromosome theory, the emergence of the discipline of population genetics with the work of R. A. Fisher, J.B.S. Haldane, and Sewall Wright unified the idea of evolution by natural selection with the Mendelian genetics. Here, because of these three scientists, the origin of the life and its natural selection and evolution was, unified. That all the work in a synchronized manner, producing the modern synthesis, or you can say the modern understanding of the evolution and genetics. The inheritance of acquired character was rejected while the mutationism gave way as genetic theories matured. Like acquired character theory was like if someone has a scar and it will acquire, like that was rejected, and mutation, the spontaneous evolution due to some kind of external factors, gave way to the genetic theories. In 1970s, Stephen Jay Gould and Niels Ehrlich proposed the theory of punctuated equilibrium, which holds that the status is in the most prominent feature of the fossil record, and the most evolutionary changes occur rapidly over the relative short period of time. As this also proved that mutation is one of the major bases for the evolution. In 1980s, Luis Alvarez and Walter Alvarez proposed the hypothesis that an impact event was responsible for the Cretaceous and Paleogene extinction event. This was the extinction event that led to the extinction of the dinosaurs. You can't say dinosaurs are extinct because birds are also a form of dinosaurs. Also in the early 1980s, statistics analysis of the fossil records of marine organisms published by Jack Spekowski and David Embrock led to better appreciation of the importance of mass extinction events to the history of the life on Earth. So here we are discussing the evolution of like all the life from its origin, since the JBS Haldane proved the genetic, like from inorganic material the life it formed. And here is one of the pictures of the Thomas and Morgan's illustration of crossing over, part of the Mendelian chromosome theory of heredity. As you can see, the chromosomes are overlapping and crossing over. So this is the end. Thank you. Any questions, anybody? कैमरा ऑन कर लो भाई. अब क्या हो गया, खत्म हो गया सब कुछ.
भाई बहुत ही बढ़िया वेबिनार था.
थैंक यू सो मच.
काफी मजा आया हरमिलन.
फर्स्ट टाइम मेरे को अच्छा लग रहा है कि लोगों को हिस्ट्री सुनने में मजा आया.
वो वाली हिस्ट्री नहीं थी ना जो तू सुनाता है,
ये रिलेटेड हिस्ट्री है इसलिए मजा आया सुनने में.
एंड फिर आगे जो एवोल्यूशन एंड जेनेटिक्स में व्हेन यू वेंट ना, और भी काफी इंटरेस्टिंग हो गया था.
आराम से देख, ह्यूमंस ने स्टार्टिंग की मेडिसिन से, धीरे धीरे मतलब पूरा अलग अलग फील्ड्स बन गई 19th सेंचुरी.
मिलन चैट पढ़ी तूने?
पढ़ ली भाई, पढ़ ली. अब नहीं भेजी है कि
हो यार.
हाँ तू बोल.
हाँ, अब मतलब सेमिनार खत्म हो गया है तो आप लोग सिंपल बातें कर सकते हो, कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है. निहारिका के पास टाइम लिमिट की कोई कमी नहीं है मेरे ख्याल से.
अरे निहारिका क्या रिव्यू से बहुत सारे डाउट्स है, मेरे को इसने प्राइवेट में मैसेज किया.
अच्छा उसे डाउट था, वो तुझे मैसेज करेगी. क्या बात है.
मैंने उससे कोई क्वेश्चन पूछा था तो उसने जवाब में वापस किया कि मेरे को तो अभी बहुत सारे डाउट थे मैं end में पूछूंगा।
क्वेश्चन क्या था वेदांत?
LOL।
लेट्स कीप अ Q&A सेशन। तो जिसको भी पूछना है कुछ डाउट्स वगैरह पूछो।
तो यार एक क्वेश्चन था कि तुम मतलब जैसे एरिस्टोटल का जो व्यू था मतलब रिगार्डिंग स्पॉन्टेनियस जनरेशन और जो इसके रिगार्डिंग जो इस्लामिक व्यू उसको तुम मतलब कंट्रास्ट कर सकते हो, मतलब दोनों में कुछ डिफरेंस अगर हो तो।
हाँ, मैं ऐसे बताता हूँ, जैसे कि एरिस्टोटल था ना, उसने फील्ड रिसर्च की थी उस टाइम में, कि जैसे कि डायसेक्शन, विविसेक्शन वगैरह। आप समझ रहे हो ना कि एरिस्टोटल ने
नहीं, आई
रैशनल
एम
थिंकिंग के
आस्किंग
बेसिस।
लाइक रिगार्डिंग स्पॉन्टेनियस जनरेशन, मतलब एबायोजेनेसिस के रिगार्डिंग।
मतलब देखिए, जब तक एंशिएंट और मेडिवल में काफी हद तक लोग अभी भी मानते हैं, हम तो, मैं कहता नहीं कि भगवान ने की दुनिया 7 दिनों में बनाई थी एडम और ईव का, तो तब भी था, आज भी है। तो इस्लामिक व्यू ऑफ पॉइंट का ऐसे है कि उन्होंने, इस्लामिक ने कोई नई डिस्कवरी नहीं की, उन्होंने जितने भी एग्जिस्टिंग कल्चर्स का काम था, फील्ड का, रिसर्च का, उन्होंने उसको क्लब कर दिया। तो लिटरली आप अगर इस्लामिक टेक्स्ट या फिर अरेबिक के टेक्स्ट पढ़ेंगे तो उसमें एरिस्टोटल को वो अरेबिक में अरस्तु बोलते हैं और प्लेटो को अफलातुन। उनकी लिटरली फिलोसफीज, अलेक्जेंडर को वो सिकंदर, सिकंदर उसी से तो नाम आया है अरेबिक से।
ये
तो उन्होंने
ये
उसको
इंटरेस्टिंग नई चीज
अपने
है,
व्यू
ये
ऑफ
नहीं
पॉइंट से
सीखा हूँ।
दिखाया है। क्या?
ये नई चीज है, थैंक्स, मेरे को पता नहीं थी चीज, मतलब दिस इज लाइक रियली मतलब इंटरेस्टिंग स्टफ।
तो इस्लाम वाले मतलब वो प्रूव करते थे कि जैसे कि उनकी मतलब ड्राइविंग फोर्स क्या थी, उनको कोई मतलब कि उन्हें ऐसे था कि जो कुछ उनके होली टेक्स्ट में है, जैसे कुरान में लिखा है, तो उसको प्रूव करना है। तो लिटरली उन्होंने अकेली साइंसेस में नहीं किया, जैसे कि आप देख सकते हैं अलजेब्रा है, अलजेब्रा जो
हाँ,
मैथमेटिक्स का एक
वो
काफी
भी
बड़ा फील्ड है।
अरबिक टेक्स्ट बुक से आया ना, शायद
हाँ,
ऐसा नाम था, अल जबर वल मुकाबला, ऐसा कुछ नाम था टेक्स्ट बुक का।
अलजबर का मुकाबला वो।
हम्म।
अल उसने क्या, उसका नाम नहीं याद आ रहा मेरे को, उसने बगदाद में लिखा था, बंदा तो उज़्बेकिस्तान का था, पर वो मतलब बगदाद तब सेंटर था अब्बासिद कैलिफेट के दौर का, तब गोल्डन
ओके।
एज चल रही थी इस्लामिक कल्चर की, मंगोल्स के आने से पहले। तो काफी हद तक वैसे था कि वो अपने रिलीजन के दायरे में रहकर ही रिसर्च कर रहे थे, जो कि काफी हद तक बहुत ब्रेक थ्रूज थे उसमें भी, उस जमाने के हिसाब से, जैसे कि अलजेब्रा हो गया। और जितनी भी हमारी इंडियन साइंसेस थी वो अरब अरेबियन टेक्स्ट से होकर ही यूरोप तक पहुंची थी।
तो मतलब हम बेसिकली कह सकते हैं कि उनका और जो चर्च का व्यू था उसमें काफी सिमिलरिटीज थी, मतलब जो क्रिश्चियन चर्च था, क्लर्जी
हाँ,
था मतलब क्योंकि
एक्चुअली
क्रिश्चियनिटी
जूइश,
में तो ये
जूइश क्रिश्चियंस और इस्लामिक एक्चुअली अब्राहमिक फेथ है इनकी, मतलब
हाँ,
सारे
थ्री
प्रॉफिट्स
अब्राहमिक
वगैरह भी
रिलीजन।
सेम है।
हाँ।
तो
हम्म।
इनका सारी थिंकिंग ऑफ वर्ल्ड व्यू, पॉइंट ऑफ थिंकिंग, उनकी आइडियोलॉजी सेम है, और डिफरेंसेस इनके प्रॉफिट्स पे पड़ते हैं, उसमें हम डीपली नहीं जाएंगे, तो उसके लिए अलग सेमिनार लगेगा।
हरमिलन अपनी वेबिनार की सीरीज चलाएगा अब, है ना?
चला सकता हूँ, कोई दिक्कत नहीं है, मेरे को तो हिस्ट्री पे अगर 8-8 घंटे बुलवा लो मैं तो बोल दूंगा।
यार मैं भी शायद सितंबर या फिर दिसंबर में दूंगा एक वेबिनार, मतलब देख लूंगा वेबिनार वेब सर्वर्स के ऊपर, मतलब प्लांट्स वगैरह के लिए, मेडिसिनल प्लांट्स के। अभी मैं ज्यादा कुछ डिस्क्लोज नहीं कर सकता हूँ क्योंकि वो अभी थोड़ा कॉन्फिडेंशियल है, जो काम है वो, मतलब अभी पेपर पब्लिश नहीं हुआ है, तो जब पब्लिश हो जाएगा तो मैं तब ले सकता हूँ।
ओह, कॉन्फिडेंशियल। ठीक है, ठीक है। वी आर वेटिंग।
निहारिका, इट्स हिज चॉइस।
वेदांत, नो। मतलब क्या है?
एक मैं भी ड्रग ड्रग डिस्कवरी पर कर रहा हूँ, अगर चांस मिले तो शायद मैं भी इससे दूंगा, मतलब एआई से हम ड्रग डिस्कवरी कैसे एक्सप्लोरेट कर।
क्लियर
हेलो।
ड्रग डिस्कवरी बोला
हेलो।
आपने?
या